Hi friends, in this video we're going to talk about all the different tasks on this new TOEFL Essentials test. There are 15 tasks in total, plus a personal statement or an interview at the end of the test. This is quite different than the original TOEFL IBT, so it's good for you to understand exactly what these tasks are and how you can answer them well. So that's what we'll do in this video. But before we start that, if you're new to this channel, hi, I'm Luke from TETready.com. And we plan to be the #1 resource for this new TOEFL Essentials test. So if you're thinking about taking this test, hit that subscribe button because I will be releasing more information about this test, plus lots and lots of practice videos. Okay then, well let's start talking about all the different tasks on this new test. But before I talk about each task individually, let's look at an overview of how this test is structured. So this test is structured in a similar way as the original TOEFL IBT, in the sense that it's broken up into 4 sections. We have a listening, reading, writing, and speaking section. But one thing that's very different is that at the end of this test, you will have 5 minutes to do a personal video statement. This is not scored, but the university you're applying to can view your personal statement. The listening and reading sections are relatively similar in the sense that you have roughly the same amount of time, around 21 to 30 minutes, and the number of questions you get is roughly the same. For the writing section, you have between 24 and 30 minutes to finish, and you get around 15 to 19 questions and 2 tasks. So just to let you know very quickly that it's not 15 to 19 write-in tasks, as in writing an email or writing an essay. That would be insane. Actually, the questions on here are more like sentence building tasks, which are short and, in my opinion, relatively easy to do. You only have to write 2 long responses. We will talk more about this in detail later, but I just wanted to let you know that quickly. And lastly, for the speaking section, it's around 13 minutes. In this 13 minutes, you'll get 3 tasks with 19 responses. Again, though, these responses are not that long. It's not that much in reality. So that's a quick overview of how this test is structured. It is quite similar to the other ETS tests, which are broken up into the 4 sections. But what makes this test quite different is the amount of different tasks you have for each section. You get more questions more frequently, but with much shorter responses. And while most of you might think that this is easier than the longer responses on the traditional TOEFL IBT, it does come with some challenges. So now let's go over each of these different tasks individually by section. We'll talk about what the task contains, how many times you have to do it, and I'll give you some little tips as well to help you to answer these questions well. Okay then, well let's start with listening. Okay, so for the listening, there are 4 different task types. We have listen and reply, listen to a conversation, academic listening and announcements, and academic listening talks. You might have noticed that those first 2, listen and reply and listen to a conversation, are general English tasks, while the other 2 are more academic listening. That's another key feature of this TOEFL Essentials test because it tests your general English skills and your academic skills, which is quite different than the original TOEFL IBT, which is only academic. Okay, now let's take a look at what each of these tasks actually look like. So listen and reply. For this task, you have to listen to a question or a statement as a part of a short exchange between 2 speakers. And then you have to select the most appropriate response. And when you take the test, it will look something like this. So for example, this person might have said, "Did you watch the basketball game last night?" And then you have to pick the best response, which is the second one, "I don't like basketball." Something like that. The next listening task is listen to a conversation. And here you have to listen to a short conversation between 2 speakers and then answer 2 questions about the conversation. And the topics are usually general topics. This example was a hotel check-in. Other general topics might be about entertainment, health, homes, or travel. Something simple like that. And for this task, it's important to remember that you have to answer 2 questions. Those are the 2 general listening tasks, and overall I think they are quite simple, especially when you compare them to the IBT listening. But now let's take a look at the 2 different academic listening tasks. Okay, so the academic ones, in my opinion, are going to be a bit harder. The first one is academic listening announcements. So your job was to listen to an announcement about university registration and then answer 2 questions. And the second academic listening task is called Academic Listening Talks. Here you listen to a short academic-related talk, which will be about 100 to 250 words, and then you answer 4 questions about it. In the practice test, the talk was about spiders, which would be an academic topic related to science or biology. So those academic listening tasks are a bit similar to the TOEFL IBT, especially the second task, the academic listening talks, where you have to listen to a lecture on a special topic. The topics will be academic related and the talk will be quite formal, probably some kind of presentation. So topics you can prepare for history, science, geography, politics, anything like that. Very similar to the academic talks on the IBT test. But these ones are quite short, only 100 to 250 words. In my estimate, that's about 3 to 5 minutes. So a bit shorter than on other academic tests like this. Okay, now let's take a look at the reading sections. Again, there are 4 different question types to go through here. Okay, so for the reading tasks, we have vocabulary, general reading in daily life, and then academic reading tables and academic reading passages. You might notice that again, this one is broken up into general English and academic English. This is a key feature of this TOEFL Essentials test. So let's start with vocabulary. Even though this task on the surface seems quite simple, I think it could be a little bit tricky for some students. So basically here, you have to see a word and then choose the most similar word from 4 options. So in this example here, the word is fabric, and you have to choose a word from the list at the bottom. Embrace, fringe, migrant, or textile. Of course here the answer is textile. Fabric is a type of textile. Fabric and textile are much closer in meaning than the other ones. So that's the vocabulary question. I think it's quite simple to do, but if the word is unfamiliar to you, it could be quite hard because there's no context to guess from. I'm not sure exactly how many times you're going to get asked this question on the test, but I think it'll be somewhere between 10 and 15 times. But I'm not exactly sure since ETS hasn't released that information just yet. Okay, next up we have general reading for daily life. Here you have to read a short, non-academic text, which won't be long. At most, it'll be 150 words. And this text is something that you will see in everyday life, such as a poster, a menu, social media post, an email, this type of thing. And your job is to answer 2 to 4 multiple choice questions based on the reading. This is a pretty standard task on most tests. Now let's look at the academic ones. The first academic reading is called Academic Reading in Tables. Your job is to read a short academic text in a grid format. So these academic tables will summarize key information from an academic field, such as from a textbook, newspapers, journal articles, etc. And you always have to answer the questions as true, false, or not given, based on the information in the table. The table will have between 50 and 85 words, and you have to answer 4 questions about it. So learning how to read a table efficiently would be really helpful for this task. Okay, next up we have academic reading passages. Here you have to read a short passage around 200 words on these different topics. Topics such as science, history, art, or business. Then you have to answer 6 questions about the passage. So I'm sure this question type will be quite familiar with you if you've studied any type of English academic test in the past. You have to read a long-ish passage on an academic topic and then answer several multiple choice questions. Usually the multiple choice questions start off very general and then get more specific as you go through them. So it tests all of your different reading skills, reading for gist, finding specific information, and also making inferences. All of which are essential reading skills for studying at a university. So it's quite good that this TOEFL test has this task here. So that was the reading section. Now let's move on to the speaking section. So there are only 3 speaking tasks, you'll be happy to know. We have read aloud, listen and repeat, and a virtual interview. The first speaking task is read aloud. So this one is quite interesting. You have to simply read one part in a dialogue that takes place in a daily life or a university campus situation. It seems to me that you will have 6 turns in this conversation, and each turn is around 1 to 3 sentences. So for this one, basically you're reading one part of a conversation. You're going to listen to someone say something, and then you're going to read the response. And you will do this 6 times in one conversation. The next speaking task is listen and repeat. Here you have to repeat a series of 8 sentences about a scenario in an academic or social setting. So for this listen and repeat task, you actually have to listen to a sentence being spoken to you and then repeat back exactly what was said. Of course, this tests your listening and speaking skills. You will have to do this around 8 times per question, and it's presented to you in this grid-like format. So take a look here. So when you get the test, actually it looks like this. So you can see the numbers here, 1 to 8. You have to click on the number, you will listen, and then you repeat the words back exactly out loud. Make sure that you speak clearly and use correct pronunciation. And the last speaking task is very interesting. It's actually a virtual interview. So here you participate in a simulated conversation with a pre-recorded interviewer. The interviewer is not live. It was recorded sometime in the past. And the interviewer will ask you 5 questions related to the topic. The topic is at the top here in blue. I think that most of the topics for this interview will be academic related, and your job is to listen to the interviewer and respond appropriately and correctly. You're supposed to talk about your opinions and your experiences related to the situation presented to you in the top of the screen. You will have time to read the situation before the interview starts. So actually, I think this task is the most innovative task on this test because the interviewer looks like it's live, but it is pre-recorded. But it does have the feeling of an actual conversation, which is good. So those were the 3 different speaking questions on the TOEFL Essentials test. Now let's move on to the final graded section of this test, which is, of course, writing. So there are 4 different writing tasks you have to do. The first one is build a sentence. Then you have to write an email, describe a photo, and write for an academic discussion. Let's start with build a sentence. This one is relatively simple. Basically, you will view a sentence with words or phrases in the wrong order, and then you have to put them in the correct order grammatically. Okay, so even though this one falls under the writing section, it's not really a writing task, it's a grammar task, which is fine, and you might get this several times in the test. That's why the number of writing tasks was quite high, because this one will be the most common in this section. Next, we have writing an email. Here you have to write an email for a specific purpose. For example, making a recommendation, extending an interview, proposing a solution to something, this type of thing. The next one is describing a photo. Here you have to write a social media post about the photo, and the aim is to describe the photo to your social media friends. So those 2 tasks, the write an email and describe a photo, are certainly general English tasks. They're not academic, so the topics you will get will be very general. You don't need any subject-specific knowledge in order to write these answers very well. Now let's take a look at the academic one. And the final writing task is certainly an academic one. You have to write for an academic discussion. So you have to state and support an opinion on a given topic in an online class discussion forum. So even though this question type is presented quite differently, like an academic online forum, the type of questions look really similar to the original writing on the TOEFL IPT or on the IELTS test, for example. It basically seems like you're going to be given a topic and then you have to suggest your opinion and back it up with some information, which is very similar to the other tests. It's just presented in a new format. We don't know the word length required yet, but I would imagine it's about 150 to 200 words. But I'm not sure about that exactly. Okay, so those were all of the graded tasks in 4 sections: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Now let's take a look at the final section on this test, which is a 5-minute ungraded interview, or personal statement as they say. So let's take a look at how this one looks on the real test. Okay, so the personal statement will look like this. Your camera will be on, and remember that the university you're applying to will be able to view this full statement. ETS has said that this whole personal statement will last about 5 minutes. The first question is always, what would you like to tell people about yourself? Then for the second question, you can choose out of 2 questions. And for each of these questions, you will have 30 seconds to prepare and 2 minutes to respond. ETS has said that the complete responses should be between 1 and 2 minutes in length. And remember that this is an unscored task, but the university will be able to see it. And interestingly, if you're not happy with your response, you can actually redo that, which is super kind of ETS to allow you to do that. This type of interview or personal statement is becoming really popular in different tests. I know the Duolingo English test also do this. So even though it is ungraded, I think it does play an important part in your application to a university. They will be able to see it and get a feel for who you are and what type of personality you have. So again, even though this is ungraded, definitely study and prepare for this question type. And that's it. Those were the 15 different tasks on this new TOEFL Essentials test, plus the personal statement. It is a lot of tasks to prepare for, but since they are shorter and I think in some ways more intuitive, it might be easier for you to prepare for this test rather than the TOEFL IBT. I'm going to keep making lots of videos about this TOEFL Essentials test, so if you want more, hit that subscribe button and write yes below in the comments. Okay, that's all from me today. Thank you very much for watching this whole video, and I'll see you soon. Bye.